Merhabalar. Bir hafta aradan sonra yine karşınızdayız ve maalesef heybemizde yine yeni bir şey yok. Gözaltılar, yasaklar, konser iptalleri, ihlaller, davalar ve soruşturmalar. Yani ifade özgürlüğü gündeminde değişen hiçbir şey yok. İşte bizim gözümüzden bir haftanın özeti.
A lawsuit was filed against Bir Gün Daily editor Gökay Başcan on the grounds of the news about the law amendment that gave the Environment Agency, established under the auspices of Emine Erdoğan, the authority to transfer the coasts to private companies. The journalist is charged with insult in the lawsuit filed at the Istanbul 17th Criminal Court of First Instance. The news in question was blocked on the grounds that it damaged Erdoğan's reputation.
The concert of Kurdish artist Mem Ararat in Mersin was banned by the Mersin governor. It was announced that Ararat's concert at Yenişehir Atatürk Cultural Center was cancelled hours before the event.
The concert that İrem Derici was going to give in Elazığ was cancelled after the singer was targeted as not being in line with the moral values of the people.
The police prevented the statement made in protest against the banning of traditional folk festival in Istanbul Sarıgazi by the governor due to the governor's ban on the pretext of providing public order, peace and security. At least 17 people were detained.
An investigation was launched against women in Eskişehir on the allegation of inciting the public to hatred and enmity on the grounds of their protest against the death of Mahsa Amini in Iran as a result of beating by the morality police. An investigation has also been launched against 9 young members of the People's Democratic Party after they organized a march in Urfa against the murder of Amini, alleging that they violated the law on meetings and demonstrations number 2911.
People's Democratic Party young members were beaten and detained while protesting in Istanbul Taksim for Mahsa Amini, who was murdered by the morality police in Iran.
The Istanbul Anatolian 9th and Aydın 1st Criminal Judicatures of Peace imposed access blocks on 4 different content consisting of news about access blocks on the website of the Dicle Fırat Journalists Association.
6 people who unfurled the flag of the Federated Kurdistan region at a football match in Diyarbakır were detained on the charge of performing a terrorist act by unfurling the flag of an imaginary country.
Journalist Arat Barış, who faced an arrest warrant against him on charges of public incitement to hatred and hostility and insulting state institutions, was detained for his news and social media posts.
The police raided İdil Cultural Center in Istanbul Ok Meydanı, where Group Yorum Band continues to work. 5 members of the band were detained.
Music band group İsyan Ateşi soloist Yılmaz Karaaslan was detained on the grounds of the folk songs and anthems he sang.
The Istanbul governor did not give permission to investigate Istanbul Police Department Security Branch Manager Hanifi Zengin, who battered and threatened women and LGBTQI+ during the Pride Parade in Istanbul. Ignoring the police violence recorded by the cameras, the governor claimed that 373 people were detained using gradual and proportional force. The violence committed by Zengin, who had detained AFP photojournalist Bülent Kılıç during the Pride Parade against many women and LGBTQI+ activists on the same day, was also reflected in the camera recordings. Zengin also came to the fore with his attitudes and threats against journalists who followed the protests of health workers on July 7.
Diyarbakır Bağlar District Police Department claimed that they could not reach police officer Serdar Gök, against whom a warrant was issued on the grounds of having a dog attack Menice and Şehmus Yılmaz after their house door was broken during an operation in Bağlar on May 31, 2020. Police officer Gök is on trial on the charge of willful injury by abuse of public office, yet cannot be reached by the Security Directorate. However, Gök is still on duty at the Diyarbakır Security Directorate.
Haftanın adliye mesaisi de yine bir hayli yoğundu. Rize'den Muğla'ya, Diyarbakır'dan İstanbul'a, gazeteciler, siyasetçiler, ekolojistler, sosyal medya kullanıcıları yine adliye koridorlarındaydı.
The conviction of 11 Turkish Medical Association Central Council members who were sentenced to prison on charges of public incitement to hatred and enmity by the Ankara 32nd Assize Court for the statement titled "War is a Public Health Issue," published on January 24, 2018, during Turkey's Afrin operation, was overturned. The appeal court issued the acquittal of the physicians.
The second hearing of the lawsuit filed against Contemporary Journalists Association Rize branch chairman journalist Gençar Karafazlı was held at the Rize 4th Criminal Court of First Instance for reporting the news on the allegations of harassment and mobbing against Recep Tayyip Erdoğan University students by faculty member, Associate Professor Serkan Hacı Caferoğlu. The trial of the journalist will continue on December 20th.
The trial of reporter Hazal Ocak, photo reporter Vedat Arık, Cumhuriyet Daily's former managing editor Olcay Büyükbaş, as well as former editor-in-chief İpek Özbey, continued at the Istanbul 25th Assize Court on charges of targeting people who took part in the fight against terrorism and violating private life due to the news titled "There Are Illegal Structures at the Bosphorus," published in Cumhuriyet Daily about the demolition of illegal structures built by the Presidential Communications Director Fahrettin Altun by the municipality. Deciding to send the file to the prosecutor's office for an opinion on the merits, the court adjourned the hearing to February 1.
The trial of two environmentalists who stood guard to prevent the Akbelen forest and its surrounding olive groves from turning into coal mines in Milas district of Muğla continued at the Milas 3rd Criminal Court of First Instance on the grounds that they resisted the gendarmerie. The case was adjourned to November 21st.
Journalist Sabahattin Önkibar, who was charged with insulting the president due to his statements on YouTube, was sentenced to 11 months and 20 days in prison by the Istanbul Anatolian 53rd Criminal Court of First Instance.
Journalist Rabia Önver, who was charged with making propaganda for a terrorist organization on the grounds of her social media posts, including her tweets on the anniversary of the Roboski massacre and the murder of Tahir Elçi, was sentenced to 1 year, 6 months and 27 days in prison in the lawsuit filed against her at the Van 2nd Assize Court. The court deferred the announcement of the verdict.
The trial of 38 people, including journalists Vedat Örüç, Taylan Öztaş, and Tunahan Turhan, continued at the Istanbul 13th Criminal Court of First Instance on the charge of violating the law on meetings and demonstrations for protesting the trustees appointed to People's Democratic Party municipalities. The next hearing will be held on February 28.
The trial of journalist Burhan Ekinci continued at the Istanbul 30th Assize Court on the charge of making propaganda for a terrorist organization on the grounds of his Twitter posts. The court denied the request for the defense of the journalist living abroad to be taken by rogatory and decided to wait for the execution of the arrest warrant issued against Ekinci, adjourning the hearing to February 1st.
The trial of Quarterly Thought and Theory magazine, Demokratik Modernites editor-in-chief Ramazan Yurttapan, Agos Daily's Armenian language editor Pakrat Estukyan, lawyer Emran Emekçi, Mehmet Nimet Sevin, and Cihan Doğan continued at the Istanbul 3rd Assize Court on charge of making propaganda for a terrorist organization. The next hearing was scheduled for February 1.
The latest hearing of the lawsuit filed against 7 Boğaziçi University students was held at the Istanbul 21st Criminal Court of First Instance on charges of public incitement to hatred and enmity on the grounds of the Kaaba image and the LGBTQI+ flags in an exhibition held within the scope of the protests against Melih Bulu, who was appointed as director of Boğaziçi University. The trial of the students will continue on February 17th.
The trial of journalist Hayri Demir continued at the Ankara 15th Assize Court on the charge of terrorist organization membership and making propaganda for a terrorist organization on the grounds of his journalism activities in northern Syria. The next hearing, in which the opinion on the merits will be presented, will be held on October 4.
The trial of journalist Zübeyde Sarı continued at the Istanbul Bakırköy 24th Criminal Court of First Instance on the charge of public incitement to hatred and enmity on the grounds of her social media posts. The court decided to send the file to the prosecutor's office for the preparation of the opinion on the merits. The next hearing will be held on December 1st.
The lawsuit filed by Sinpaş Group against environment activist Halime Şaman, who announced to the public that the constructions of company in Kızılbük Bay in Marmaris harmed nature, continued at the Istanbul Fifth Commercial Court of First Instance. The next hearing will be held on January 25.
The non-existent lawsuit filed against the Tarlabaşı Community Center with the complaint of the Istanbul Governorate on the grounds that the realization of the purpose of the association has become impossible was heard at the Istanbul 8th Civil Court of Peace. The request of the Ministry of Family and Social Services to be involved in the case was accepted by the court, and the trial will continue on May 9th.
The trial of 40 people, including 2 journalists, who were detained during the statement made by the dismissed workers in front of the SML factory in Avcılar, continued at the Istanbul Büyükçekmece 10th Criminal Court of First Instance on charge of violating the law on meetings and demonstrations. The next hearing will be held on February 10.
The latest hearing of the lawsuit filed against 24 women at İzmir Bayraklı 7th Criminal Court of First Instance on charges of insulting the state and violating the law on meetings and demonstrations due to the demonstration held in İzmir on December 15, 2019, within the scope of the Last Thesis demonstrations to protest violence against women, was adjourned due to the court's excuse.
The trial of journalist Cengiz Çandar and activist Kemal Işıktaş continued at the Istanbul 13th Criminal Court of First Instance on the charge of praising the crime and the criminal on the grounds of a Twitter post he made on his personal account on May 30, 2017. The next hearing will be held on November 22.
The trial of PEN Berlin spokesperson and Die Welt Daily reporter Deniz Yücel continued at the Istanbul 2nd Criminal Court of First Instance on charges of publicly denigrating the Turkish nation, the state of the Republic of Turkey, and insulting the president due to 3 separate articles published in 2016. The next hearing will be held on January 24th.
The trial of 35 members of Beşiktaş supporter group Çarşı continued at the Istanbul 13th Assize Court on charge of attempting to overthrow the government, violating the law on meetings and demonstrations, and terrorist organization membership on the grounds of the Gezi Park protests. The next hearing will be held on January 17.
The latest hearing of the lawsuit filed against People's Democratic Party co-chair Figen Yüksekdağ and parliament members İdris Baluken, Çağlar Demirel, Altan Tan, Ahmet Yıldırım, Ertuğrul Kürkçü, Mehmet Ali Arslan, and Saadet Zenginli, who came to Silvan district of Diyarbakır after the curfew declared in 2015, was held at Diyarbakır Silvan Criminal Court of First Instance on charges of resisting to prevent duty, insulting a public official, and insulting the president. The trial of the People's Democratic Party members will continue on January 26th.
The trial of former People's Democratic Party MP Çağlar Demirel continued at the Diyarbakır 4th Criminal Court of First Instance on charge of insulting the state and the government due to his words that the AKP had organized the ISIS attacks against his party as well as 2 protests he participated in. The next hearing will be held on November 15.
The lawsuit filed against 38 people, including People's Democratic Party parliament members Tayyip Temel and Pero Dündar, continued at Diyarbakır 2nd Assize Court on charges of establishing and leading a terrorist organization. The court denied the request for the stay of the proceedings on the grounds that the parliament members had parliamentary immunity. The next hearing will be held on February 28th.
The trial of Mikhail Tunçdemir and Ferhat Duman, who were the distributors of the newspapers Özgürlükçü Demokrasi Daily and Azadiye Velat Daily, continued at the 1/5 Assize Court on charge of willfully aiding a terrorist organization and making propaganda for a terrorist organization. The next hearing will be held on November 10.
The trial of Özgür Gündem Daily's former managing editor Reyhan Çapan continued at the Istanbul 2nd Criminal Court of First Instance on charges of making propaganda for an organization through the press and printing or publishing the statements of terrorist organizations. The journalist and her lawyers did not attend the hearing with excuses, and the hearing was adjourned to February 7th.
Geldik bir haftanın daha sonuna. Programımıza sığdırabildiğimiz ihlaller bunlar oldu. Daha fazlası her zaman olduğu gibi internet sitemizde ve haftalık bültenlerimizde. Haftaya yeniden burada olacağız. Hoşça kalın.